Okay, we're looking to solve these quadratic equations, and we're going to use the technique of square roots. And the reason that I know that I can use square roots is you use this technique when you have one of two situations. You either have just an x squared, or in this case it's an m, but a variable to the second power, and that's the only place you see the variable, or you happen to have it like contained in a set of parentheses. So it's plus or minus a number m squared. So we have that here. We have an m squared. That's our only variable. So we're going to solve for this guy using square roots, which means I'm going to want to isolate that m squared. I'm going to want to get it by itself. So I have a couple things going on. It's times 1/2 and it's subtracting 4. I'm going to undo that subtracting 4 by adding 4 to both sides first. Let's see, that's going to give me, keep my equal sign here, 32. And then I'm going to have 1/2 m squared. Now this is where a common mistake happens. A lot of people will see this as multiplication and they know that they need to divide by 1/2, but they'll look at that and they'll say 16. So if you are thinking 16, you are making that same really common error. 32 divided by 2 is definitely 16, but this is not times 2, so we don't want to divide by 2. This is times 1/2. We need to divide by the fraction 1/2. And that's going to give us 64, right? Do it as a decimal too. 32 divided by 0.5. It is 64. So that's what happens here when we divide by the 1/2. And I know it looks weird here to see the division of 1/2, but it's exactly what we type in the calculator, divide, and then I just put my fraction in parentheses. That's a big deal too. If you do this, 32 divided by, and you do, let's see, 1, it's going to give you 16 as well, because it's not, doesn't have the right syntax. So we really need to have this where we're putting the fraction in parentheses to get us to that 64. Okay, so at this point we're now at m squared is equal to 64, and this is a delightful number to get because when we're solving with square roots, it is very handy to get a perfect square. That is a perfect square. That means when we take the square root of both sides, so I'm just going to rewrite it here so we can clearly see my work, what I'm doing. Taking the square root over here, taking the square root over here. I was lazy on this side. I didn't write plus or minus because I knew that this was just going to cancel out. That's the point of doing it. Over here, though, it's really important that when I introduce the square root, I write it into the equation. It wasn't there and I put it there. It's with that plus or minus. So this now gives me m plus or minus 8. So these are the x-intercepts if I was to graph that. If I was to make this the equation 1/2 m squared minus 4, and then move this guy over, minus 28 equals 0. So then basically y equals 1/2 m squared minus 32. This equation has x-intercepts at 8 and -8. That is what the solution to a quadratic is, or what they are. It is the x-intercepts. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do number 10 in this video as well, solving with square roots. So this is the situation I talked about a moment ago where we have the x in parentheses. But notice there's no other x anywhere in this equation, so I can solve using square roots. Now this is set equal to y, so if I'm solving, I'm looking for the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts have a y value of 0, so I can go ahead and do that. And now I'm just going to solve for x. First thing I'm going to do is subtract 15 from both sides. And now I have 8x minus 1 squared equals a -15. Oh, I got to move it up so we can see what's going on. So, right, I subtract 15 from both sides. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 8. And here's where it gets kind of ugly. This does not go in there evenly, which is all right. All right, if I do -15 divided by 8, it's going to give me this decimal. I'm just going to leave it as the fraction, though. There's really no reason that I need to worry about even writing it as a decimal. I'm just going to do this. Oops. X minus 1 quantity squared is equal to -15 over 8. And then from here, I'll rewrite it one more time just so we can see in the work what's happening. I'm going to undo this with a square root. And at first, this looks like this is going to be kind of a nightmarish situation, right? Because I got to take the square root of this whole fraction. Nothing in there is a perfect square. This thing doesn't divide out. But my saving grace here actually is the fact that this is negative. Some of you may know right now as you're watching this that we already know what the answer is without having to plug anything in, because when we do the square root of a negative number, it's going to end up giving us an error symbol. You can't do that. Non-real answer. So actually what my answer is that there is no solution. And visually what's happening, because this is the x-intercepts, right? What happens here, I don't know exactly where this parabola is, but the parabola is not crossing the x-axis. So it might be somewhere down here or over here, but it's definitely turned in a way, right? It could be like this, where it's never going to hit the x-axis. All right, hope that's helpful. Message me anytime with questions.